Welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman. Today, got a real treat for you. His name is Ed Meece, and he is the city manager at the City of Polson in beautiful Montana. Ed, say what's up to everybody.
Hey, greetings from Big Sky. Great to be with you.
From Big Sky. Why do they call it Big Sky? I know it's
Because
a
the
football
sky
conference.
is, it's because there's very rarely a lot of clouds in the sky, and you can just
Gotcha.
see forever. So
Gotcha.
that's my theory, anyways.
I,
I'll go
I
with
would
it.
agree with that. I went to school in South Dakota, Brookings,
Oh,
South Dakota. So I know what it's like to look up and just see for miles.
yeah. South Dakota's
Miles
the
away.
same way.
All right. So you're the city manager, City of Polson, Montana. First off, I don't know where Polson is. So give us a brief description of where it's at and then what the city of Polson's like.
Okay, good deal. So the city of Polson literally sits on the southern banks of the Flathead Lake. It's in northwest Montana. We're about an hour between Kalispell and Missoula.
Okay.
Flathead Lake is the largest, we get this right, the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. Um,
Really?
yeah, it's a huge body of water. And then the city of Polson is also like several other communities. We're located on the Flathead Indian Reservation, which
Okay.
is home to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and city of about 5,000 people.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. And let's talk about Ed's backstory, and then we'll get into what it's like being on the Indian reservation and how that kind of might change things a little bit. So talk to us about where Ed got his start at and how you ended up in Polson, Montana.
Oh, yeah. So I started in local government in Kentucky. Did 15 years of local government back there. I was a city manager, city administrator in two communities in Kentucky. Had always thought I wanted to work for the big city, and got an opportunity to be one of a couple assistant director of public works for Louisville Metro,
Okay.
and enjoyed that for about a year. And then after that realized, no, you're a small city guy, and wanted to get back to it. And so I made that announcement at the dinner table one night, and our kids looked at us and said, hey, we've been to Yellowstone twice on vacation. Let's move to Montana. And
Wow.
about 6 months later, I'm the city manager in Livingston, Montana. And so that's really how that story got started, to get us from Kentucky to here. It's been a great experience. I still wear my Wildcat blue and white. Different Wildcat than those in Arizona.
Yeah.
But it's been a great time. We really enjoy life in Montana.
So what's the difference like a big city, Louisville, and then Livingston or Polson, Montana? What were some of the things that, you tell your family at the dinner table, they're okay to move. You get there, day 5, you're like, is there some regret? You're like, what did I do? Like, where's the rest of the zeros on this budget? Like,
No, that's all very applicable. You got that right. So Montana, local government is almost entirely off the property tax. We don't have a sales tax. We don't have a lot of those other kinds of fees and taxes that I found in Kentucky, or you may be familiar with in Arizona. And so that is a big challenge. And then we also have some pretty severe revenue restrictions on that property tax. So
really?
we're allowed to grow property tax revenues 1/2 the rate of inflation averaged over 3 years. So you're always playing from behind.
Yeah.
As
Okay.
far as the other biggest thing I would just say about life in Montana, besides it's a beautiful, great place to live, nothing is close. Nothing. So like, my son played high school soccer, for instance. He had teams in his conference that we had to travel 5 hours for a soccer game.
5 hours for
5 hours.
a high school
Right.
there?
Yeah,
Crazy.
that's a road trip, right?
That's like
Um,
colleges. Yeah.
so nothing's close, and you just get used to that.
So answer this for me. I mean, I used to watch the show Yellowstone. I'm not sure if it comes on anymore, but it's funny. My wife and I, we did a road trip. We went all through Montana,
Oh, great.
went through Yellowstone, went through Wyoming, Idaho, and all that. Um, And you can tell there was a sense of they didn't really want more foreigners, or not foreigners, but outsiders coming into their area, kind of like in the show Yellowstone. But like, was there ever a sense of that, you coming from a big city, Louisville, to dropping into Livingston or in Polson? Could you tell there was like some pushback or some people saying, "Oh, where's our local Montana people at?"
Oh, no, absolutely. In fact, I think every political commercial in Montana starts like a fifth generation Montana,
Nah,
right? So, I mean, that's part of their culture.
yeah,
Funny enough, when we got to Livingston, we were there for 17 years, I discovered that my great grandmother had actually lived 20 miles north of Livingston for
no
about
way.
15 years in the late 1800s. So go back to the Yellowstone thing, right? And
Yeah,
then when she died, they took her back to Kentucky to be buried. So the reason I tell that story is now when people bring up that I'm a carpetbagger, right? I'll tell them, hey, my family's been here since the late 1800s. I don't know what you got going on, but
yeah,
so but it's definitely part of the culture. And I think
sure.
trust is a big thing. So you gotta earn people's trust and work to keep it. And that's just
Yeah.
part of public service.
Gotcha, gotcha. So talk to us about what Ed does. Pretty much, what's an average day like for Ed? You're a city manager, City of Polson, 5,000 residents. You're on a reservation. What's the average day like for you? What are you doing all day?
Well, I think the best part of that is I don't have an average day, right? So, I mean, an average day for me, probably to your question, it involves time spent with operational staff. Hey, it's summer. We got 5 different water projects, sewer projects going on. What's happening there? What's behind? What's ahead? And then HR walks in and we got all our random drug tests back. And then we're going to record a podcast at 11 o'clock. And then we have a meeting with the state DOT about our revised urban funding at one. So it's just, I just give you a flavor for it. It's just, that's today. Like that's my day to
Yeah,
day, right? It's just a little bit of everything. And I've been in local government for 30 years. That's why I love it. That's why I keep coming back.
yeah.
It's that variety of tasks that I just love so much.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then some of the things that you might not have experienced down in Kentucky, being on a reservation. What are some of the differences, or some of the things that some of the listeners might not know if they've never actually had to deal with that?
Well, it's a great question. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to come to Polson. I'd never worked near or on a reservation. And so
Okay.
when this opportunity came up, it really was an attraction for me. The main thing is it's a different level of government, right? So I was used to working with county government, state government, sometimes the feds, but usually they leave small cities alone. Well, now there's a fourth layer, right? So there's tribal government. And so there are things like the lake. They actually own the southern part of the lake. So anything that's going to go on in relation to that lake, whether we have our wastewater effluent, any of that, right? It's not just a regulatory process with the state and the feds, but now the tribal government also has a role in how we do those things. So we have a great relationship with the CSKT. They work very well with us, and we try to partner wherever we can. But it's just another piece of that puzzle that you have to fit in. I think the big challenge for us now is figuring out how we can do that, not just from a regulatory standpoint, but how do we start bundling projects and doing other types of things where it's more a beneficial piece of that relationship as opposed to just
Interesting.
making sure that we're following the rules.
Interesting, because isn't some of the difference that they get federal funds and you guys are state or county funded? Am I correct in
Yeah,
that?
so no, that's correct. They get direct allocations from the federal government based on their treaty. And then there are obviously set asides and different kinds of grant programs where there'll be set asides for, tribal applicants. So that does create a different stream of funding for them as well.
Yeah.
I think, one of my big challenges though is really try to make sure that we're building and maintaining relationships that aren't transactional.
Yeah.
You'll have folks say, well, why don't we Why don't you let the tribe pay for that, or whatever. It's like, that's not how you build a relationship based on
Yeah.
who's going to pay for what. So, but funding is definitely something that's always part of the conversation.
Gotcha. And we talk about like funding and getting projects done everywhere around the country. Everybody's talking about just the workforce and the labor shortage. So with the city of 5,000, you say everything is far. What's the, I don't want to say what's the talent pool like, but is that a task at hand to find talent to be able to maintenance and operate?
Oh, absolutely. This has been, I think, I'm not saying anything you haven't heard a lot, but this is the weirdest time for a workforce that I've seen in 30 plus years. You know,
Wow.
we have got to the point at the city where we have sandwich boards set all over town. Come apply for a job. I mean,
Wow.
beyond just the typical online advertising and website and newspaper, I don't think I've ever actually set sandwich boards out in the parks and said, "Hey, come apply for a job." Um,
That's new.
it's huge. It's huge for us, and because we're a small city, your resources to um, retain people, that the compensation rates that you need to do, and so it's huge. I would say, like in Livingston, like in other communities that I've served, small cities especially, we really do a lot of it based on culture. Like, this
Uh,
is a place you want to come work. You will enjoy working here. Maybe we can't pay you as much as Kalispell or Missoula, but this is where you want to raise your family. This is where you want to
uh,
live. And um, so far, that's worked. So we've been
Good.
able, I will just brag real quick and say we've been able to build a leadership team here in the last 3 years, that I would put against any city in the state of Montana. I'm just so
I like it.
confident and proud of this group.
It's those sandwich boards, man. That's innovative, man. You're not selling
Not
ice
really,
cream, you're
but
selling dreams and jobs. I love it. All right, Ed, let's say you're on a road trip. You're taking your son and his friends to their soccer game. It's like 5 hours away, right?
right.
And one of your son's friends says, Ed, I want to be like you one day. I want to be the city manager, Polson, Montana. And he's like, what skill set should I pick up to be successful at what you're doing? What skill set would you tell him to pick up?
I would say spend a lot of time figuring out how you work best and getting organized.
Okay.
We all have different ways we organize for what our mindsets are, and here and in other positions for me, it's really been about staying organized. You need to make sure that you're being intentional with your communications, you're being prepared for your obligations, your meetings. You can't forget your city commission. You have to be responsive to your citizens and your staff, and you can't do that type of stuff if you're always trying to figure out where you have to be next, what's due tomorrow. Some of my most frustrating times are when I feel like I'm working a day ahead, right? If I'm doing
Mm,
something on Tuesday that's due on Wednesday, or I'm prepping for a meeting that's 3 hours away, that's when I get frustrated, because
yeah.
my mind needs more time to sort of ramp into those things than just 24 hours. So if they were asking me, I would say get organized. I think there's a lot of applications for a city manager, whatever degree you might bring to the table. I think really most of it's about, are you organized? Are you a strong leader? And do you have a concern for people? And
Uh,
I think those are all very important to what we do.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All right. It's story time. I need a story from Ed when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Oh, this is a great question. So when I was in Livingston, very early on in my time there, we started a major street project. It was an urban connector. We did it with the state of Montana. Um, it was going to be a great project. We were going to rebuild the whole street. We pulled the pavement up. We pulled up the curbs and the sidewalks, dug into this thing. And as soon as we did, 100-year-old trees start falling like books off a shelf. Bang, bang, bang. Well, what I didn't
No.
know and what DOT didn't know is that the water level the water aquifer was so shallow that these huge trees had a very short root system. And basically, the pavement was holding the trees in place. So when we started pulling the pavement up, they started falling. And I don't mean one or two, I mean dozens of trees. And as we all do, people are really connected to their trees, and they see their property value going down and their shade disappearing. And so, DOT's approach was, hey, give it a few days, everybody will get over it. We tried that. Nobody got over it. And in fact, it just got worse. And so what we did is we stepped in as a city. We started holding public meetings. We started a weekly. In addition to those, we started having the contractor meet with the neighborhood weekly to talk about updates on the project. We were able to find some funds and do some replanting. In the end, not just at the end of the project, which took about one summer, but a couple years later, we had a gorgeous street with sidewalks both sides, boulevard trees, just one of those projects you could take a lot of pride in. But I remember those first couple phone calls that showed up at dinner. I think it was like on a Tuesday night, and people were just losing their mind because trees were falling. You could hear them. I had somebody on the phone in the background, and I heard a bang, and that was a tree falling in their front yard. So it didn't go well, but I think we learned a lot of good lessons, and we adapted. I think that was most important thing.
Gotcha. Interesting. Thanks for that. So how does Ed keep showing up better and better every year? What's your personal and professional development regimen like? What do you do intentionally to keep showing up better?
People. I am all about connecting to other people. And, we all have things we do with our exercise routines, and for me, have a devotional time every morning, but people, I get my juice from other people. And so when I feel like my batteries are running low, I reach out to other city managers or young folks in public service that maybe I'm mentoring, make some new connections on LinkedIn, go listen to a new podcast. But I have to get a hold of people. That's really where I get a lot of my inspiration from is, hey, there's other people out there. The job is only so big. Life goes beyond the job. And so those reconnections kind of keep me going.
Gotcha. And it's interesting because one would think, the untrained eye would think that, oh, Ed moved from the big city to Montana. He's trying to get away from people. But like you just said, no, people still are that kind of that ladder fluid for your fire to keep you going. Yeah. So you can find that anywhere in a city of 5,000 or a city of 500,000. So
absolutely,
I'd agree with that.
And the easiest way to get somebody to take your phone call or answer your LinkedIn is tell them you're from Montana, because everybody wants to know about Montana, So
really,
anyways, it's a great icebreaker.
Yeah. I tell people all the time. I say probably one of the most interesting conversation pieces that I have, like what kind of gets people to stop in their tracks, is that I went to South Dakota State University. Like, South Dakota, what? Like, how'd you end up in South Dakota? Yeah, there you go.
Right?
That's the Jackrabbits.
My son went to Montana State. We were on the back end of that football game last year. So
okay,
I get it.
All right. What would you say is the biggest misconception about the city manager position? Let's say we asked your wife's friend, like, hey, what does Ed do all day for the city? What would she get totally wrong in answering that question?
Everything. I don't think most people have a clue what a city manager does. I get called the city planner most of the time. They just don't. I think as a country, we do a lousy job with our civics education, and
100%.
We did this in Livingston. I started teaching a 3 or 4 night class. We called it Livingston 101, and it was just a local civics class so that we do it once or twice a year, invite the public in and try and explain how the different levels of government work. What's the difference between a mayor form and a city manager form? We're going to start doing that in Polson this fall.
Cool.
I don't blame people. They've got soccer games to go to. They've got to get to, other events in life. They've got bills to pay. local government only touches their life most of the time. Do they notice when something goes wrong? Right.
Yeah.
And then they're looking for who can solve this problem today. Right. So, but I enjoy it. At the City of Polson, as most city manager forms, the city manager's the CEO, and it all flows downhill or it all flows uphill, whichever direction it's coming from.
Gotcha. All right. Uh, let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Polson. What ask of your community would you put on this billboard?
I think I would ask, be patient. Just the fact that we are at the current point in time, the city's trying to overcome what I would call decades of bad infrastructure decisions, specifically
Right.
streets. And I mean, there's hardly a street in town that doesn't have some type of asphalt distress, whether it's potholes or alligators or whatever. And you can't fix it all at one time, especially with limited resources. So we've done all those best practices to get ready, and now we're actually implementing the projects, but it's going to take time for us to get there. So I would just ask people to be patient.
Gotcha. And not to bash the previous regime, but how can a city, I guess, use what they've done wrong in the past to kind of operate in the future? Let's say, Ed, you're the city manager. We're moving to Mars. You start fresh. What would you do differently to make sure that we don't have these issues in 30 years from now?
No, I think that's a great question. And we talk a lot, I'm going to go back to this word. We talk a lot about culture, right?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. Previously, when the water department would go out and dig up a water line, they would patch that street. If that water line went right down the middle of the street, then the street got a 3-foot patch right down the middle of the street, right?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help. That might put some black on the road, but it doesn't really help the damage you've done to the street. So the new culture is, look, if water line digs it up and they damage the street, they fix it curb to curb. That's on the water department, right? Now, if the water department, we just had this happen. Water department goes in to do a project, they dig up the street. There's an inch of pavement and an inch of gravel. I mean, that's what I just found last week. That's not the water department's fault, right? I'm not going to hold them responsible for rebuilding the street the way it should have been to begin with. So I think it's about culture. It's about accepting that there's a higher standard we're trying to get to. And I'd rather do one project really, really well and then move on to the next most important priority than do a half a dozen. Yeah, I'll let the next guy figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And certainly not continue to just kill ourselves by a million cuts and all these little, I tell people, if you go look at our worst potholed streets and worst damaged streets, don't look for the potholes, look for the utility cuts. Find the utility cuts and then start to look where your potholes are gathered up and where they're right there together, right? So we're getting the culture working on the same page, right? So that one's not seriously denigrating the other all the time. So that was a long answer. I apologize.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey, and then also give us a word of inspiration and motivation to your countrywide city manager counterparts.
Okay, good. So I've had a lot. I've benefited from several mentors over my career, but I think my biggest mentor is my dad. My dad went from extreme poverty in Eastern Kentucky, the first guy in his family to get a college degree. He had to hitchhike to do it. He did 4 jobs at a time, and then retired as an executive from the phone company. So he got to see life in both worlds, and from a very early age was teaching my brother and I about the dignity in all work. He was teaching us about respect for everybody wherever they find themselves in life. And So I think he just gave us both some really basic tools for success. There were a couple little tricks that he taught me along the way when I got a little bit older as it applied to management and leadership and things like that. But I would definitely say that's my biggest mentor, and those are some of the lessons I'll never forget. Inspiration for city managers across the country. Thinking about that billboard you were going to have me put up. I guess I would say hold on. Just hold on. I think right now, and for the past 3 or 4 years, local government's been in a period of just civil unrest. Not, and I'm not describing the unfortunate events like some of the police situations and that, but just city commission meetings themselves have just sort of declined to a point of animosity and personal attack, and the way that people are treating each other and their local officials. This is a lot of what I hear and do when I'm talking to other city managers. There's just a lot. I'm very fortunate that we don't have that in Polson to a great degree. We get it from time to time, but I'm working for a great commission who really doesn't encourage that. And so that's not the case everywhere in the country. And but I would just tell them, hold on. It's going to get better.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's say I'm coming to Polson and I text you ahead of time and I say, hey, Ed, where can I go to get the best burger in Polson? Where are you going to send me?
I am going to send you to Rich Wine's Burgerville, which is right in the middle of town on Highway 93. It has a very, very short driveway, but it's still a drive-in type of service. There's no sit down. And I'm going to tell you to get the Bernie burger, which has ham and cheese. It's one of those
ham.
Can you really eat it type of burgers.
Okay.
I'm going to send you to Rich Ones, and they also have a great milkshake, so you can throw a milkshake right beside that hamburger too.
Whew, I love it. Love it. All right, Ed. Well, thanks for popping on the podcast with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Ed, any final words before we get out of here?
No, just thanking you for the opportunity to be here and be a part of what you've got going on. And again, thank you to the other folks out in local government for what they do. I really appreciate this community.
Yeah. And I do like your idea on kind of the Polson 101. I think once you get that up and running, you should scream that from the mountaintops, because a lot of other cities could probably benefit from that. Like you said, just showing the constituents like who does what and how things work, and kind of why things take so long and where their money's going.
Absolutely.
For sure. All right, Ed. Well, once again, thank you for hopping on the show. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thanks everybody for tuning in.